This is MJ at Lioness Publications. And what we're going to do today is, well, first off, I am just going to have the graph up on the screen. So I'm actually using an application from Microsoft, so I don't think I have to worry about licensing rights here. And I've used this a few times before, shown this, and it's a proprietary software algorithm that I created. And it creates what's called a risk yield chart and also a delta core transit. The important one here is the risk yield. And there's an algorithm where I look at all the factors astrologically and, in effect, create a graph from that. And it's really interesting. The nice thing about this, you also don't need a birth time. You only need the birth date. So there is some less level of accuracy with this, but it's been very good in spotting trends. Very good. I've used this in with corporations, with company charts. I've used it with state charts. I've used it with the USA chart, and I also use it with politicians' charts. So you can usually see trends. And what you're seeing here is you're seeing Texas. So let me explain first how to read this graph. And the top one is the risk yield. The bottom is the delta core. And the top one, the risk yield, has what's called transient and core, and it has yield and risk. If you look at the chart, the upper portion of the chart is actually yield. The bottom is risk. Now, yield, think of it as having the opportunities to move things forward, where you are able to get things done. But it can also be a time when things are too easy. The risk is when you have difficulty in getting what you want done, accomplished. It's not necessarily bad, but it is a challenging period, which means you have to go the extra effort to overcome obstacles that show up in your path. Now, the lighter blue is transient, and the dark blue is core. The lighter pink is transient on the risk, and the darker color is the core. Now, the difference between transient and core is how they interact on the chart. When you have a transient type of event, it's something that will pass within a few days. But it could have a factor in determining other things. So, for example, a transient event would be a corporation publishing their earnings. Normally, you'll have a reaction to those earnings, and that will happen within a few days. That day, maybe the day after. But that will also have a long-term effect, in effect, a core issue. So if it's a good earnings report, then over time, if the company has more money, they can spend more on employees, they can spend more on R&D. So it's setting up to have good opportunities moving down the line. Same thing if you have a difficult earnings report, you'd have a little blurb going down that's a transient, but you'd have the core also following later. And for example, a difficult earnings report would move the stock down. But long term, it might make the company lay off employees. It might make for a more difficult work environment, not able to invest. So that's the difference between those two types of trends. You can have both happening at the same time, or you can only just have one happening. So, yeah, we went into quite a bit of discussion on how to read this. So let's take a look at Texas. And this is going to be pretty quick. I mean, it was a lot of time spent on understanding how to read it. Well, Texas, starting off in the year, is pretty, we've got both risk and yield, and that's, okay. We come up into the early part of May, and we're seeing that, it's a little bit more on the yield side, which is, good. But then we're starting to see right around 6/1 we're having a severe dip, a valley, into risk. And note, right around the 7-1 period, we barely have any yield at that point. So what was happening around that time? Well, I gather you read the newspapers. Now, if we look going further, we can see that we've got just a little bit, this is the lighter blue, transit, but nothing long-term that's showing up being positive for Texas. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't make progress. It just means it's going to be difficult. Now, if we take a look at the bottom part, we can see that, yes, we have the risk showing in both the core and the transit. We can see that continues. This could be, in effect, from the damage the floods caused. So this is going to be a long-term effort going forwards. Now we can see this is the biggest sort of down valley with the involvement of the core. Over here we see another down valley, but it's more 50-50 of core and transit. Now let's take a look and see if we can make a little bit more sense from the delta core. This is also set up with the yield and the risk, but more importantly, what it does is literally subtracts, does the delta between the yield and the risk to identify, in effect, at what period are you more into being able to use your resources effectively, or are you more that you're challenged? So we can see here that, yep, we've been challenged for a while here. We've got the valley at 7-1, and we're pretty much staying below in the risk area. And the chart is broken up at the 0 line here. Above this is yield, below that is risk. We can see in this case the transit a little bit more distinctly. We can see some ups and downs here. We can see an up happening around September 1st, and then moving down again around the 15th of October, plus or minus. And note, the points are measured at the beginning of the month and also at the 15th of the month. So in effect, we're not doing measurements for every single day. And we also do a measurement on the last day of the year around 12:30. So in this case, this is showing that, yes, we've had the major incident here, and we now have a recovery period for a pretty decent long period. Now, one thing that wasn't quite obvious here is that we can see that the core is actually moving up at the end of the year. So hopefully this is going to keep on moving up, which means that you're going to be at that point more into being able to move ahead rather than just doing recovery. Now, I hope you enjoyed this. And as a note, this is available also to people. I have prices on my website, lionesspublications.com. And thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you actually were able to see all the distinct features of this chart. Have a good one. Bye now.